Welcome to Mark My Words, a show that searches for the fork in the road in life, the place where the turning point in the journey of entrepreneurship and life can be found. Let's meet each other at the crossroads on Mark My Words. Not often that I have somebody on my show who is not only an expert and thriving photographer in the business world, but also somebody who is a former athlete. But I have the combo of the two on Mark My Words today. Very excited to talk to Lesle Lane, who's the founder and lead photographer of Studio 13. She's a third generation photographer with deep roots in the industry, has deep roots in the Indianapolis area in general, and she is also a former ice skater and coach, from my understanding as well. And I can't wait to talk to Lesle not only about her great photography, business, and skills. She has some really great work flowing around out there. She's got a real good eye. And also looking forward to talking about her athletic career and how that may or may not be influencing her as a businesswoman. But let's just kick this off by saying welcome, Lesle Lane, to Mark My Words. How you doing?
I'm doing great today. Thank you so much for having me. It's a great opportunity.
Well, it's a great honor to have you here, and can't wait to talk about topics that I love to talk about, which is not only just the competitive spirit, but also photography, which I consider myself a amateur photographer, definitely not a professional, but I do the best I can with the skills I learned in school. And I know that you have learned a ton since you are coming after generations who have been doing photography for a long time. And can't wait to just talk about your path a little bit. And I will start that off by talking about just going all the way back to, not even college. Let's just talk about the impact of growing up around photography. Is this something that you knew you wanted to do from an early age? Did you gravitate towards it, or were you looking to do something else?
Well, first and foremost, let me say being an amateur is a wonderful thing. My mother taught me at a very young age that amateur comes from the Latin root to love. And so it just simply means that you love the craft. And so to all the amateur photographers out there, keep taking pictures, keep enjoying it because it is a wonderful way to, spend time, whether you're a hobbyist or a professional. So as you said, I'm a third generation photographer. And my grandparents had their business in their home. And then as I was growing up, we had our business in our home. And so having that constant influence day in, day out, I mean, even the subtle things, Mark, like behaving professionally, because I was around clients day in and day out, going down to my grandparents' house in Columbus, Georgia, and seeing that even though they did portrait and wedding photography, and my family, we did commercial photography, some of those basic principles of running a business and customer service and just being a good human to the people that you're around, it was just bred in me. So, did I really want to be a photographer? I'm not sure about that. I was influenced heavily to be a photographer. And so, by the time I went to college, it was pretty well known within the family that I was going to follow in the footsteps of my parents and my grandparents.
So between you being influenced by your grandparents and growing up to understand what it takes to be a professional, and then also being a competitive ice skater, which is also very like disciplined. You have to have a very grown up mindset. I mean, I can't imagine. Did you feel as if you might have been a little more grown up than your peers? Like, how did it help you in life to have that kind of influence?
There's no doubt, Mark. Being a competitive athlete, I don't care what your sport is. Some people would argue that the individual sports make you more grown up. I don't know that I believe that because when you're out there and you're practicing day in and day out, and you've got coaches and judges that are they're judging you every single day. I started the sport when I was about 7 years old. So talk about that large piece of ice with a very tiny child that could not tell right from left. I'm dyslexic. And so I had issues with my both learning at a school level, but also just the silly things. My coach had to write R and L on my skates for me because for the life of me, I could not remember which one was which. And it was intimidating. And you would go out and you would compete and you would not do well, or you would take a test and you would fail. And you're just a kid. And so my coach, one of my very favorite coaches, Barbie Loeffner, one day she looked at me and I didn't get the result that I wanted and I started crying. And she grabbed me by the nape of my neck and she took me in the bathroom and she's like, "There is no crying until no one is watching." She said, "You stand there and you take your information, you take the critique that they've given you, you smile, and then you go someplace else and break down." And that might seem harsh to people that have never been in a sport before, but I tell you, that's a life lesson. Life is going to kick you down. Things are not going to go. The best person doesn't always win, and you've just got to face it and go someplace else when you're ready to just lose it.
And I mean, I feel like I'm a person who has a lot of discipline. I grew up a particular way, but for you to have that mindset and to have that particular mindset like taught into you at such a young age, it definitely separates you from the pack, in my opinion, because I just see it just as a person today where I was raised a certain way and much in a similar fashion was taught, crying is not there's a time and a place to cry and sometimes you just gotta plug through and become and take in the information that is being given. And I guess the lesson is to not let your emotions get in the way of the job.
Yeah, and certainly as a photographer, talk about being critiqued on a daily basis. It's never ending, whether it's a portfolio review, whether it's a client that I'm going out to pursue, prospecting, somebody is judging me. And a lot of times it's not even based on my work. Do they like me as a person? Do I rub them wrong? I'm not everybody's cup of tea. And even though I might be the best person for the job, did I wear something off-putting that day? Did I say something off-putting that day that I didn't mean to? Or did they just have somebody they liked better? You never ever know what makes that indecision. But I think in many professions in life, you don't always hit a home run that day. You just don't.
And I love that attitude because that's a very similar attitude that I try to teach on this show. Because what I'm trying to do is not only be informative to those who are entrepreneurs, but I'm also trying to be informative to those who might be struggling a little bit mentally or trying to get over some of the obstacles that I think a lot of us have as far as can I do this? Can I get past this obstacle or this challenge in order to thrive and to make my business be more successful, profitable, whatever that looks like to you. So I know for me, whenever I've had a bad day or maybe I've had a bad episode, this is my business, this is my show. So it hits me to the core, like it's a reflection of me. So you almost have to kind of, as you kind of presented earlier, you take the information, you go with what you're going on, you keep plugging away and working. But once you turn off the camera or turn off the lights, that's when you go and you cry or you sulk or you feel bad and take in those emotions, but then you dust yourself off and try to understand what went wrong, what you can do better, and keep on going. And I've lived it. And not only does it sound like you've lived it, but it's like in your DNA. So,
It really is. And on that note, Mark, I think that sometimes it's not when you have a bad day. Let's say you have a bad episode, but what if you have two? What if I go on a shoot and it's not my best, and then the client tells me it's not my best, and then a prospective client tells me I'm not the best? I think that the problem is not just when you have a bad day, but when you have a bad week, and the more that those episodes, not podcasting, but life, they pound on you, it's hard to think positively when you've had multiple days, weeks, and months. And so for the entrepreneur, there's a lot of photographers that are solopreneurs. So they are the only person out there doing the photography, looking for the jobs, prospecting, networking. It's hard to go out there and sell yourself as a great photographer or a great videographer or whatever kind of industry you're in when you really don't feel that great. And I just think that that negativity just it winds you up and it winds you up and it winds you up until one day you're sitting in front of a prospective client and you're going, I don't even believe I can do this. Why can I convince you that I can do it? So I think that we all just need to be real that sometimes it's not just a bad day. You know, sometimes you, like you're talking about, you're at the bottom of the barrel. My business was doing poorly back in the Great Recession. I was going through a divorce at the same time. It was like everything was against me. But I reflected back to my skating days because in ice skating, you have to take tests in order to compete. And there was one test that I had to take 7 times. It took me years to get past this one hurdle. And my mom said to me at that time, you can quit as soon as you pass. You cannot quit ice skating until you pass. And it took me 7 tries. And on the seventh try, do you think I wanted to quit once I passed the test? Of course not. And I pass that on to everybody that's an entrepreneur. You can quit after your next success. Then you can quit.
well, when you talk about all of that, the first thing I think of is I've been doing this show for 5 years now, and there's certain goals that I want to hit that I haven't yet. And not that I would quit once I hit those goals, but there's something inside of me that just will not quit. Like I just can't, I don't know if I'm crazy or what it is, but there's just something in me that's like, don't quit, don't give up. And maybe somebody like you can articulate what is going on in my mind better than I can. I just know that I refuse to quit.
Well, you're not alone. I've got a great friend of mine who he said the same thing. He goes, failure is not an option. And I think people hear that and they're like, oh, that is so trite. But it's a mentality. It truly, it's not that you're crazy. I mean, you, as my children say to me, you are, but for different reasons. It's not that you're crazy. It's just that you, either through teaching, through life lessons, whatever it is, you have been ingrained in yourself that the only failure is to stop trying.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine after all the work, and I guess that's the parallel. I know that being an ice skater, not that I've been one, but I do know enough to know that that takes a lot of hard work, a lot of dedication, a lot of discipline. And when you're running a business on your own, it takes similar qualities. It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of discipline. I'm giving up a lot of days of just hanging out on the couch doing nothing or going out in the Florida sun to concentrate on what my goal is, which is to make this more successful, profitable, etc. And there's certain things that you gotta sacrifice in order to get there. And that's the mentality I feel, or at least a mentality that you have to have if you want to have a business and have that kind of independent success.
It's true. And I've had so many, your show is so much about crossroads. It's so much about when you're at a T in the road and what do you do? And I've had so many of those times in my life. The very first one in the business industry was that I was the office manager of my parents' business when my father was taken out with a stroke. I had never ever used professional equipment before. I had never been taught how to use the lighting. And for those people that are at a crossroads in their business, several things besides the lineage, besides my family, certainly my mother and my grandparents were there for me. My aunts are also in the business, but I had a right hand person in the business that believed in me. And so as entrepreneurs are at their crossroads, you might want to think about who's standing beside you other than a spouse or a family member. Who is that support person encouraging you? Or maybe like in my case, she was teaching me. So she knew how to use the gear, not really the cameras, but the lights. She was a lighting technician. She was a lab technician. So she knew how to process the film. And every night we would practice at the studio what I had to shoot the next day. She would run the film. We would look at the film. And then when the film was good enough, I was allowed to go home and sleep. But do you have somebody besides you? Do you have a network of people that are giving you both constructive and positive feedback? Who are you surrounding yourself with so that when you're at that crossroads, you feel comfortable making whatever decision is next?
So before this point in your life, did you know that eventually you were going to start picking up the equipment and you were going to start being a photographer or being active, or were you just happy to be a part of the team?
So I graduated from school and started in the business as the office manager. And my stepfather really wanted me to be a wedding photographer, and I wasn't really keen on that. And so one thing led to another. I was planning my wedding. Things just weren't going well in the family owned business, as many people can imagine. And so my parents went down to Florida so that my dad could have open heart surgery. And I wrote my letter of resignation so that when they got home, I could hand it to them because I was done. I didn't want to do it anymore. It's just too much family drama. And so I never got to turn that in. I think I still have it somewhere just because it's now hilarious 30 years later that I have the letter of resignation that I never got to turn in. So it really was one of those things that I had one foot out the door until my dad was taken ill. And then nothing, it was like, okay, here we go. This is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to give it every single bit of effort that I have.
So what was the most challenging thing that you needed to learn, whether it was business related or photography related?
It was kind of all the above, Mark. First of all, I was 21 and stupid. Let's be clear about that. I'm not going to mince words. I had delusions of grandeur, felt like I was smarter than I really was. So I had so much ahead of me that I didn't even comprehend that I didn't know what I needed to know. Photographically, yes, I knew what I needed to learn. I knew how to learn it, and I had a plethora of resources when it came to that. Business wise, I was 21 years old. Everybody in the business, my dad had 6 employees at the time. Everybody in the business was 40 and older. And so they had zero respect for me, as they shouldn't. And then all the clients were at least 30 and over. So there was this kid that they'd known because I was in the business every day. So there were so many obstacles for me to overcome. Luckily, I'm the type of person that when I see an obstacle, it's like eating an elephant. You just take it one bite at a time. And so I was able to really compartmentalize that the first thing I had to do was learn how to take commercial photography. And so I was able to cut off a little slice at a time. And honestly, I can tell you from a business perspective, I feel like I'm still learning every day because the industry's changing and how you run a business is changing. And so that's something that even though I gained a lot of that over the years, I did finally go back to school and get my master's in business to help shore that part of me up. And I still feel like I'm learning that part of it even today.
You said something very important, and for those who are listening, whether you're into photography or more of a television film type of, I guess, cinematography, because I got my degree in like basically television production. They called it electronic media, but it's television production. But one piece of advice and important thing that you just said is that you're always learning. And that is true, I think, in most any artistic uh, career that you choose. You'll learn the basics, whether you did it on your own, like you did, obviously some mentorship too, but a lot of that you did on your own. I went to school, but everything I learned 20-ish years ago, while the basics and the foundation is there, a lot of it is totally different, and you're always learning. It's not the same world it was back then. So it's very important if you do go into any artistic endeavor, especially as a business owner, you're just be ready to be constantly learning.
Yeah, I told a client of mine a while back, I feel like that I'm finally to the point where I'm a better business person than I am a photographer. And I'm a really good photographer. I'm not minimizing that. But I finally feel like that all of my years of experience, all the people that I've surrounded myself, I have a huge network of people now. I finally feel like that whether I have the knowledge or not, I have someone around me that has the knowledge that I need. So it's a great age to be where I feel like I am still relevant. I'm still creative. I still have a lot to give the marketing and advertising world, but I've got just enough experience to really understand the business side of it. And selling a creative field, going out and finding work, that is very challenging for someone who is creative. And so just continuing to get more and more confident in my abilities and my business sense as I'm out meeting people, it's very important.
When I look back and I think of myself as like a 20-ish something trying to navigate the world and just find myself, I look back now and I'm like, oh man, what a dorky doofus I could be at times. And I don't think that a lot of people see themselves that way when they are that age. They're just like, oh, I'm grown up now and, I'm ready for the world. And you might be, but you have no idea how much you're going to learn. Were you kind of feeling similarly? Like, how did you wind up winning over people at the point in life that we're at now? How did you win them over as a business person and photographer?
Well, I was very lucky that one of my dad's biggest clients at the time was a regional supermarket chain. And a lot of the photography wasn't difficult. Product photography on a white background, it's not that hard, but the customer service aspect of it was. And so this particular client expected to be treated like the King of England, and I did not give him the respect that he expected from me. And so one day the phone rang, because that's how we did it in the old days, folks. We answered the phone. And he called me to his office, which was about 20 miles away from our studio at the time. And so I wore my best business suit that I owned to go see this client and proceeded to fall down the stairs as I was going to his office because I had on shoes that were too high for what I was doing. And as he picked me up off the ground, he took me into his office and sat me down to explain to me that I was not giving him the customer service that he demanded. And if I did not straighten up my ways, he was going to take the account away from the studio. Well, his account was keeping the business open while I was learning the business because the photography was being done by one of the more experienced photographers that my dad had on staff. And you can imagine I'm sitting there in this vice president's office, basically getting my butt handed to me. And I left not knowing what had hit me upside the head. And I got in my car and I'm like, okay, this is a life altering experience. I think I'm understanding what's going on. What I didn't know is that while I was on my way back to the office, he called my mother and told my mother what he had done. And that his browbeating he gave me was nothing compared to the browbeating my mother gave me. And it was an amazing experience because that was life changing. I was 22 years old, felt like I was competent enough to take over a 40-year-old business. And I learned very quickly, you got a lot to learn. So again, it may sound harsh, but I count that as one of the most important changes in my psyche to let me know that I had a lot to learn. I was overconfident, and I'm not scared to say it out loud. I was overconfident as a young woman.
What did you learn over the years when it comes to customer service? Because I gotta imagine that is super important in what you do. How have you evolved your skill set in customer service over the years?
Well, I saw somebody recently that put down, I've seen photographers with a $500 camera get $10,000 jobs, and photographers with a $10,000 camera can't get a $500 job. And so I think that, and the rest of that article was talking about photography has become something that, due to technology, you can take a relatively good picture with a relatively inexpensive camera. What photographers can't do, because artists are not known for their business sense, is they can't answer the email in a timely manner. They can't get the quotes done in a timely manner. They can't deliver the proofs on time. They can't do the editing and deliver the final files on time. They don't send invoices. They don't collect the checks. They don't do all the things. And so what we've tried to do, I now have a team of about 8 or 9. I lose track because it's kind of changing right now. I have about 8 or 9 people on my team. They all know the process. We have it on our website, what our process is for each client, and we try to solve a problem other than photography. And so what we've started doing is that if we're going into a corporation and we're shooting, last week I shot 117 headshots down in Atlanta for 2 different clients. If they needed us to schedule those headshots for them, we have a platform that we can send out to their entire corporation that they can schedule their headshots so that the marketing team or the administrator or the human resources person doesn't have to. So we're just stepping in and we're just doing everything we can to solve a problem. Do you need for me to talk directly to your subject? Do you need me to do, what do you need me to do as far as producing this job so that you can move on? Because corporations are getting leaner and leaner, and they're putting more on their people's backs. And these people are tired, they're frustrated, they need help. And so if that means that we follow up every 2 weeks because the client's like, if you don't follow up every 2 weeks, it's going to fall through the cracks, then we follow up every 2 weeks. So it's more about problem solving, good business, and then photography is one component of that.
I totally agree with some of that, really all of that. But I think what I guess your basic, the core of your point, I can just kind of say this show. So just to kind of bounce off of that, getting to the guests and doing that part of the customer service comes first. It comes before even having like a great production. I mean, you see behind me, it's just a regular room with cat tree behind me, and I got records, vinyl records, and a punching bag, which just put it out there. I haven't used that in a long time, so things have been going well in life. But it's basically just my mind is on just making sure that I reach the people who are reaching out to me and accommodating, making sure I do all my research, having fancy graphics and fancy audio equipment is not like the front of mind for me. And I've had a lot of people say, boy, your audio sounds great. It sounds better than a lot of other shows. But all I have in front of me is a mic standing on top of like this mic case that you like just carry the mic around in, and then some little desk that you put a laptop in, and it's just plugged in, plus the ring light is plugged into the computer. This is about as lo-fi of a production as you can probably get for a podcast, yet I'm getting the most out of it and using my resources to the best of my ability without really, it goes back to your analogy about the expensive equipment versus the less expensive equipment and how you're making use of everything.
Yes, absolutely. And I just think that imagery, yes. I mean, I need to deliver a great image. It needs to be sharp. My clients require larger resolutions than other clients do. So all of that's important. I'm not saying that, but being effective, I can't lay it out there enough that my clients, I'm very blessed. My clients become my friends most of the time. I think that many of them would say that, and just continuing to celebrate their victories. If they get married, they're probably going to get a card in the mail from us. If they retire, they're going to get a card in the mail from us. Every client gets a thank you note. It does not matter if I've worked for them 50 times or one time, they're going to get a thank you note. If you refer a job to me, if you are the reason I got that job, you're going to get a thank you note for that. If you take a meeting with me, you're going to get a thank you note for that. Just that touch of saying, I'm not taking you for granted. You are important to me and important to this show. I think that all those things that we both do for our industry are important.
And that's one of my favorite things about running this show and being in business for myself. It's not actually the views or the downloads, and those things are really nice, and you want that. But establishing relationships and meeting all these people that you probably wouldn't meet otherwise, and you get that a lot with having a podcast because one day I'll meet somebody like a Lesle Lane who specializes in photography and has a really neat story. But then there'll be another day where I'll have a show with like a fractional CEO or, just somebody who's doing something completely different. And it's all about like the joy that I get from the relationships that you develop. And, it's not necessarily like you're going to necessarily hang out with all of your guests or your clients, but they get to know you and you get to know them and you establish that respect and that rapport and you never forget them. And it's like everybody that I meet and have on this show, I never forget about them. I'm behind them and in their corner with anything they do. Anytime they have a success, I feel very happy for them. And it's that kind of reward that you get from having a business, I think.
Oh, I agree. And I just feel like that's such a key point right now in our country that I think we need to talk about. And that is that there is enough room for everyone to have successes and us be happy for them. I don't need to compete against, I love that we have so many great photographers in this city and around the country. There's enough work for us that we don't, yes, we compete. Of course, I get disappointed when I don't get the job. No two ways about it. I'm a competitive person, but mostly against myself. And so when I see somebody succeeding, I am thrilled for them. I'm thrilled for them. And I think part of that, Mark, is that I had so many difficult times in my life, so many times where I was down at that crossroad and somebody was there to pick me up, whether it was my mother, whether it was my longtime assistant that was with me. This last time I've had a huge crossroad, it was my kids. My kids, my husband, my friends, my clients, let's just all celebrate when good things happen because a lot of times bad things happen. So let's just be happy about the good things.
And that's one of those points is really important because I'm not sitting here going over what some other podcast host is doing, saying, well, their graphics look better or their backdrop looks better or they're having more success. I bet they're getting more downloads. My focus is on how I can be better. I'm totally behind other people. I want others, especially those who I've met and collaborated with, I want them to do well. But you're not going to get anywhere if you're dwelling on comparing yourself to others and why you're not doing as well as them or something you're celebrating this and now I'm mad because I don't have anything to celebrate. It's not an attitude that's going to get you where you want to go.
Certainly not. And I think that there's some things that you and I really do have in common, Mark. And that's just that you can get so that you're comparing yourself to other podcasts, but it's your style that approaches certain people. It's my photographic style that relates to certain people. And so they're real, even though you're in competition to other podcasts, I'm in competition to other photographers. You're really not, because my style doesn't look like somebody else's style, either from a lighting standpoint, from a, visual standpoint. Maybe I choose different lens selections. You choose different topics. You choose different hosts. I mean, different guests. And there really isn't a competition between you and everybody else. You're really in competition with yourself. What do I want for this? Where do I want to go? And I think that's very similar to what I'm doing as well.
Well, you talked a little bit about mentorship earlier
Mhm.
and how that was important for you. How do you take that and mentor others today while we're all trying to accomplish our own goals and we're competing but supporting? How are you mentoring and paying it forward?
Well, I'll tell you, if it weren't for my family, I wouldn't have even had the ideas of mentorship, because I didn't even know they were mentoring me. And there they were, mentoring me all those years. And then, as I told you, Tina, I didn't mention her name. Tina was the person that said, I will come beside you and help you learn this. And she mentored me while my mom mentored me. And I lost Tina 3 years ago, completely unexpectedly. And I like to mention it every time, because every day that I mention Tina's name, she's still here with me 30 years. And my daughter came alongside me during that time to help me adjust the business again, because that's what business is. Business is pivoting between, here's where the business is today. You're at a crossroad. What are you going to do? And I vowed at that time, because I don't have any generational people ahead of me. So my children are not going to join the business. My grandchildren, only 3 and 1, who knows what they're going to do, that I was not going to keep this knowledge to myself, because a lot of it's not just, here's how you do things well, here's how I screwed things up, don't repeat it. And so on my team, I have a lot of photographers that work with me, that I mentor them. And I've even started reaching out to local colleges to see if they have people that would like mentors. And so I've got several young people through that I'm just coming alongside them, because again, they're not going to do things the way I do things. And so there is no competition between me and young people coming along, and I can just pass some of my information off to them.
And that's what I'm hoping that I can do as time goes on. Mentorship has come up a couple times over the past few episodes I've done, and it's made me reflect because, frankly, I did not have a mentor for doing a podcast or running a business. And frankly, I don't really know if I've ever really had like a mentor, really. I have had along the way things that have inspired me and influenced me. So I'm not just like, an atomic person who's just like, I'm my own influence and whatever. I'm not quite that egotistic or anything, but it's hard for people like me. I've had a particular kind of life where I've been very resourceful, resilient, and have had to kind of just figure things out. So for me, I kind of came into this. So at the very least, I had people coming up to me. It didn't just come out of thin air that I decided to do this, really. I did have people come up to me and say, you should create content. You should maybe think about doing a podcast. But nobody really like taking me under their wing as a mentor. So it was just up to me to be like, well, I like what they're telling me. There must be something to that. I'm going to listen. So I'll give it a shot. And I just kind of went and figured it out. So long story short is that my hope is that I can reach people from here if they do want any kind of mentorship or want to learn. I would really like giving that back because I know what it feels like when you don't really get it and you kind of feel a little more like you're on your own. And I love hearing stories like yours because that's what it's all about. I think we should all have somebody kind of at least giving us some sort of mentorship if we're serious about doing something and then pay that forward. That seems like the nice thing to do.
It certainly is. And I'm going to encourage everybody to also make sure there's people not in your field that are in your circle. So if you compare the Great Recession to COVID, because they both had economic impact, even though the Great Recession was a W recession where COVID was a V. Um, the difference in my life, because I had a circle of bankers, human resources people, all kinds of different, financial advisors. I had a circle of people that as soon as COVID hit and we shut down, I had people that I could call for advice. What do you see is going to happen to the corporate sector? So mentorship, and whether it's a mentor or a mentee, very important to have somebody in your field, but also in your circle of influence, you need to have people that are not in your field, because when stuff hits the fan, you need somebody to call that can give you valuable insight so that you can take care of your business or your family, whichever one.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, as you're talking about banker influences and stuff, I have a couple people in mind who would give me some very good advice in that regard, and that's a really good type of person to have in your life. So, if you don't have a financial person or a banking person who you can bounce things off of as a mentor, definitely work on getting one. That's a good person to have. So just kind of going from there before time gets away from us too much. I want to ask you, since you are a photographer professional, you've been doing it for a long time, and I love studying people's photography and cinematography. I love getting lost in their perspective and what might have been going on in their mind and their technique. I have to ask, what do you think goes into creating a really great shot, something memorable?
Boy, that's a great question. My industry is so different because we are assignment photographers, where we come at it with a marketing person. A lot of times there's a storyboard involved, and we know that we have to create an image that matches the branding. So, as a corporate photographer, we all work in collaboration with each other. Now, my mom was a fine art photographer, so everything that she did came from that amazing brain of hers. And so, what she did that I think made her an amazing photographer is that she was able to tell shadow and light. And she was an incredible graphic designer, so that when you put an image that my mom made, it would lead in, circle around what you wanted, what she wanted you to see, and lead out. So those are just kind of some classic examples of what makes a great photographer. But also, my mom was of the generation, she got to study with Ansel Adams. And so when you've got somebody like my mom who is incredibly creative, and then she gets to go out and study with the greatest landscape photographer, in my opinion, that ever lived. And then my stepfather was a technical photographer. He was a technical lab technician. And so he would take her film and he would process it differently to create more grain or less grain, more blacks, less whites, whatever they were looking for. And he could take her film and take it to the next level. And so, as we're now in the age of digital, and we're now in that shoot and process situation, I feel that that editing component is equally as important to the capturing component, and making sure that your images have the graphic, the lights and darks, the contrast, and the post production to pull it all together in one image. So that's a very long way of saying that the old tendencies of great photography still hold true and great photography today. We just have different tools by which to get there.
Talk about creativity a little bit because even though you, as you said, it's more of a corporate structure versus something like your mom would have done, creativity still matters and it still plays a role. Talk a little bit about not only creativity in the more artistic side, but also in the business side.
Sure. So I do everything from food photography, headshots, industrial manufacturing. I mean, I'm what they call a generalist in commercial photography. And I think the difference between now and let's just say 10 years ago in my career, I was so tired of other people telling me what to do. And there just came a point where I reached a level of confidence where I would push back. So, not in a mean way. I don't think any of my clients would ever say that I am egotistical. A lot of photographers are, and they're prima donnas. They would never say that about me. But I got enough confidence in my creativity that I could say, now wait. Here's what I think we should do based on my years of experience, and here's why. So, my creative juices, I feel like, especially in the last 10 years, have definitely elevated because I don't let people do something that I know is creatively a mistake or that looks like a mistake or that it's just somebody that doesn't have the experience that I do because many of my clients are younger than I am. And so now I'm to the point where I can say, I will do it that way and I do it. And then I say, but let's try this. And so just being able to be more comfortable expressing my creativity instead of feeling like I was stuck, that I had no choice. You have to have customer service, which means you do it the client's way. That is so wrong. And I thought that way for many years, Mark, that if I'm going to be great at customer service, I need to be a welcome mat and they're going to walk all over me. Probably lost a lot of clients that way. I don't remember it, but I'm sure that people wanted more from me. And now I'm comfortable giving it.
Excellent point. That is something that I'm really trying to teach people. And it's another topic that's been coming up a lot, standing your ground and giving yourself the power to say no or to say, hey, we need to make an adjustment and not do it in a harsh way. But I don't know if it just comes with experience and not just so much business, but in life because I know there was a time in my life where I wouldn't really stand on my own 2 feet the way I do now, where if I don't like something or I don't like the way somebody's coming at me with a project or whatever, I'll just be like, look, that's not going to work for me. That's not the direction I want to go in. And there's a tendency when we're a little younger, maybe inexperienced, to feel like we have to say yes. And that is not true. I love the point that you just made there. That is so important, not just in business, but in life.
Well, and as a photographer, we joke. I've got a good friend of mine that's a photographer, and we joke all the time. We all feel like we're one job away from being out of business because you just never know. Because none of us are guaranteed a contract next year. None of us, just because we shoot a project this year, doesn't mean it's going to happen next year. And so, especially when you're young and you're a starving artist for a reason, you just want to get all the work. I want to get all the work, and it doesn't matter if it doesn't fit within my purview. It doesn't matter if they don't take me with any respect. Yeah, it does. It does matter. And the right client for the right photographer or the right creative industry, they will pay the money that they should pay to get the creative insight that you bring to the table. And I just think that if I would have loved if I would have learned that earlier, but some things just come with age.
And as the saying goes, it might take a lifetime to build up a reputation, but it could only take a moment to ruin it. So
Yeah, you're exactly right.
you have to be very careful about that line because I know there have been times where I have felt a certain way about how something is going down or the way I've been approached. And you want to approach it a certain way, but you also don't want to, ruin everything that you just built. So it takes a certain, I think, um, it takes a certain kind of experience. You know when you get there, when you've reached that point where you've found that balance on how to manage that. And, some of us, we learn it in our 30s, some learn it in our 40s, some maybe later. So I think for me, it was like mid to late 30s when I said, you know what, I deserve more. I'm going to stand on my feet a little bit more. And there's no way to define when, but you'll know. You'll know when you got there.
Certainly. And with digital photography, there really is no real expense to shoot it both ways. As long as it doesn't add more time to your session, so you do it their way and you do it your way, and you know your way is right, but you show them their way anyway, and then you've kept the customer service. You've kept the customer happy while at the same time showing them, here's what I was talking about. So luckily for me, we can do it both ways, and I don't have to worry about crossing any lines.
Well, how about we do the next segment of this show our way? Because I know we've been on for a little while here. Want to give you an opportunity to talk about how people can find you and how they can work with you because you reach beyond the Indianapolis area.
I do. And people normally will have me travel in an effect to keep a consistent product, which I do very well. So sales conferences all over the country, photographing salespeople from, Phoenix, Arizona to Tampa Bay, Florida. It doesn't matter. So you can reach me at LinkedIn, Leslie Lane, Leslelane. My name is spelled really uniquely, so it's hard. You can't miss me because very few people don't have an I in their name. And then you can reach me at studio13online.com. Contact us will go straight to me. So you can reach me both of those ways. I am on Instagram, Studio 13 Indie. And then I'm also on Instagram personally, Leslie Lane. So I would love to hear from anybody and love to have the followers and people paying attention to all the great things we're doing here in the great state of Indiana.
All right, fantastic. Well, Leslie, you're doing fantastic things beyond the lens, also with the lens, and I really enjoyed having you on the show. I feel like you brought a lot of really great wisdom that hopefully will inspire and will influence. I know your words are going to stick with me well beyond the session here today. Thank you again for being here. This was Leslie Lane, award-winning commercial photographer. She specializes in architecture, industrial product, food, and corporate portraiture, which is not an easy word to say out loud. She is a photographer and owner of Studio 13, located in the Indianapolis area. Leslie, thanks again for being on Mark My Words.
Thank you, Mark. It's been a pleasure.
I had blast, and thanks again for listening. Thanks for being here, Leslie. And I'll be back soon with a new episode. Bye for now. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to go on a journey with me into entrepreneurship and life on Mark My Words. If you would like to learn more about me and the show, you can find me on LinkedIn at Mark Schmidt or connect with me on Instagram at Nimrod79. Video episodes of Mark My Words, as well as other content, can also be found on the Mark My Words YouTube page. Entrepreneurship can be quite the roller coaster ride. It can be a bit isolating and intimidating, but it doesn't have to be that way. Let's meet here next time at the Crossroads on another episode of Mark My Words.